A'udhu billah minash shaitanir rajim. We seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Salāmun Alaykum. Peace be upon you. God willing, today we want to have another session for studying the Appendix of Quran, the Final Testament, translated by Dr. Rashad Khalifa, the Messenger of the Covenant. And God willing, we want to continue from the section that we left off last basically session. And today's topic is about the Quran's mathematical structure. So it says the Quran's surahs, verses, words, and letters are not only mathematically composed, but also arranged in a superhuman structure that is purely mathematical. That is, the literary content has nothing to do with such an arrangement. Since the physical construction of the Quran is purely mathematical, it would be expected that the numbers mentioned in the Quran must conform with the Quran's 19 base code. A total of 30 unique numbers are mentioned throughout the Quran, and the sum of all these numbers is 162,146, and that is a multiple of 19, and that is 19 times 8,534. Table 24 lists all the numbers mentioned in the Quran without repetitions. And here we have the numbers which are mentioned only once in the Quran are 11, 19, 20, 50, 60, 80, 99, 300, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 50,000, and 100,000. All the numbers mentioned in the Quran with repetitions occur 285 times, and this number is a multiple of 19, and that is 19 times 15. SubhanAllah. There's a lot of information here, and it is condensed. First of all, we have already talked about these numbers, these 30 unique numbers, which have occurred in the Quran, obviously in the shape of words, like in the shape of letters, not in the shape of numbers, but they are very much pointing out toward numbers. And these are the location. If you look at this table, table 24, all the Quranic numbers, these are the numbers on the left hand side, on the left hand column. Basically, we see numbers which have occurred in the Quran in different verses, and some of them have occurred more than one time. Some of them only occur once, in the Quran. And some location examples are given in the Quran. These are some verses, surahs and verses, where you can find these numbers. For example, this is just an example for these numbers. And previously in another session, I have already talked about this in details, and I have shown several of these verses pointing out these numbers. But just since it has come here, we're going to talk about it again. So these are the numbers which have occurred in the Quran: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 19, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 99, 100, 200, 300, 1000, 2000, 3,000, 5,000, 50,000, and 100,000. So these numbers add up to be a multiple of 19, and that is 162,146, and that is 19 times 8,534. So I have brought these numbers in this actually table again, and this is a very straightforward table, and we have the sum of all these numbers here, and it just is a multiple of 19. SubhanAllah, God be glorified. This is absolutely fantastic. Now, there is another fact here mentioned as well. It says that all the numbers mentioned in the Quran with repetitions occur 285 times, and this number is a multiple of 19, meaning that these numbers that we have in this basically column, all the numbers that have occurred in the Quran with repetitions, all of them, like for example, say, I don't know how many times each and every one of them are repeated, but I'm sure that if you search for them on our website, for example, taslim.org, you would be able to find the verses where you have basically these numbers repeated, and this would be a very interesting task for you, an interesting homework for you to do for yourself if you want to do it. And then you would be able to see that the repetition, of all these numbers all these numbers with repetition occur 285 times, and that is a multiple of 19, and that is 19 times 15. All right, subhanallah, and mashallah, this is what God has given us, and alhamdulillah, praise be to God. This is absolutely fantastic, and we have already talked about this in previous sessions. So now let's move on. The numbers of surahs and verses. The numbering system of the Quran's surahs and verses has been perfectly preserved. Only a few unauthorized and easily detectable printings deviate from the standard system that is divinely guarded. When we add the numbers of all surahs plus the number of verses in every surah plus the sum of verse numbers, the grand total for the whole Quran comes to 346,199, or 19 times 19 times 959. Table 25 is an abbreviated presentation of these data. Thus, the slightest alteration of a single surah or verse would have destroyed the system. As shown in Table 16, if we consider only the 29 initial surahs, these same data produce a grand total, which is a multiple of 19. It follows that the data for the uninitial surahs are also divisible by 19. Okay, so Table 16 is a table that we have previously talked about, but just a very short, brief description of what table was. We can take a look at this Excel sheet, God willing. Okay, so this is the table 16, but this is the table 16 that was talked about here. And so it is mathematical structuring of the verses of the initial surahs. So the system went like this. So we had the surah numbers, and we had the number of verses in that surah, and we had the sum of verses for the whole verses of that surah. And these are just like basically fixed numbers. So the number of verses don't change. The sum of verse numbers, we have a formula that is that number multiplied, the same number plus 1 divided by 2, and that's a formula that would give us a sum of the numbers of like any series. For example, say you want to get the series sum numbers from 1 to 286. That would be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 all the way to plus 285, 286, and then that would be 41,041. So this is like how this table was working, and this is the total of these three numbers together. So surah number, number of verses, and sum of verses, basically. We do this for all the initial surahs in the Quran, right? Then we end up with a number which is a multiple of 19, all the three columns. So we have the surah number, the verse numbers, and the sum of the verse numbers. And then you end up with 190,133, and that is a multiple of 19. So this was table 16 that was talked about in this section of the appendix. Okay, now we go to table 25, which was mentioned here, and God willing, I can explain it to you. So the table 25 is here, and this is an abbreviated version of the data that is mentioned in table 25. And alhamdulillah, praise be to God, I was able to have the complete version for myself, and I created the complete version, and God willing, I'm going to show it to you. Table 25. Okay, so table 25 is the mathematical coding of the surah and verse numbers. This is for the whole surahs of the Quran. Okay, so on the left hand side, we have all the chapters or the surah numbers of the Quran, 1, 2, all the way to 114 in the Quran. And then you have the total of all of those, the sum of all of those. Then you have the second column. The second column is number of verses. Again, this is fixed. You have all the number of the verses of the surahs. And remember, surah 9 is 127, because if it is 129, then the whole thing is going to collapse. It's not going to be a multiple of 19 anymore. And then you have it all the way over here, all the verse numbers of all the surahs. That becomes 6,234. And then you have the sum of verse numbers. Again, this is the formula that we have. The number multiplied by the same number plus 1 divided by 2. And you have it for all the basically chapters of the Quran all the way to the end of the Quran. And then you have the total of all these. And then when you sum them up, all three columns, when you sum them up, you come to this number, which is 346,199. That is exactly the number that we have here, 346,199, and that is 19 times 19 times 959. And we have it here, 2 times multiple of 19. So this is 1 time, and this is 2 times. So basically that would be 19 times 19 times 959. SubhanAllah. This is absolutely fantastic for all the surahs in the Quran. And I just showed you that the table 16, basically, that I just showed you here, this is table 16. I have just reproduced it here side by this table for you guys to be able to take a look. And these are the initial, basically these are the initial surahs. And if we extract those from among here, all the initial surahs, and put them all over here, we will end up with a multiple of 19. This is absolutely fantastic. And this is just half of the story. If we do this for the uninitial surahs, as we are going to see in the table 26, your mind is going to be blown. Let's just take a look at it. SubhanAllah. Now, so this one was table 25. I have just explained it. Table 16, we just talked about it. That was the initial, basically, surahs. This was the whole Quran, and this is table 26. So table 26 is an abbreviated presentation of the same data related to the 85 uninitial surahs. Now, let us take a look at another set of miracles involving the surah and verse numbers. Now, here, before we go to the next one, which is absolutely fantastic, let's take a look at table 26, which is the mathematical coding of the 85 uninitial surahs. And then this is the abbreviated version of it. And again, I have opened it up. You would be able to see it for yourself. God willing, I'm going to leave the link for the Excel sheet underneath the video, so you would be able to take a look at it. Now, table 26, mathematical coding of the 85 uninitial surah. So basically, table 25 was the whole Quran. Table 16 that we had, that I have reproduced it here, is for the initial surahs, and the table 26 is for the uninitial surahs of the Quran. So we have again surah number for the uninitial surahs, right? Number of verses of those uninitial surahs, and sum of verses of those uninitial surahs. All these numbers, if you add them up, you would come with a number which is a multiple of 19. 19 times 8,214, and that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, this is just a system that is unbeatable. You know, this is absolutely marvelous. You have the Quran all together, all the verses, like the surah numbers, right? Number of verses, sum of verse numbers, all multiple of 19. Now you extract the initial surahs from that, the 29 initial surahs, it becomes a multiple of 19. And then you extract uninitial surahs from the same structure that we had, again it becomes a multiple of 19. This is absolutely fantastic. This is absolutely fantastic. And again, we're not talking about words or anything. We're just talking about numbers. We're talking about the physical facts of the surahs, the number of the surahs, the number of the verses which are in these surahs, and the sum of the verse numbers. And we are ending up with multiples of 19. And this is absolutely fantastic. SubhanAllah. Now, be ready for, I would say, one of the greatest miracles here that you're going to see. This is something that took me a while to be able to just pull off, because the the calculations behind it was not that easy to be done. But God willing, I'm going to explain it to you so that you get the idea. Now, here it says that write down the surah number, followed by the number of the verses in that surah, then the number of every verse, and finally the sum of verse numbers. So for surah 1, you will write 1 for the surah, then 7 for the number of verses, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for each verse number, and finally the sum of the verse numbers, which is 28 for that surah. So we have 4 different numbers that are put together to create one number for each surah, right? So let's do this for the whole surahs, right? All of the surahs, 114 surahs in the Quran, and then you're going to end up with basically a number which is 759 digits, and then it's a multiple of 19. And this is how it's going to look like. But alhamdulillah, I was able to reproduce this in a not a Google sheet. I have done it in a basically Word, but then I have left the codes for you guys to be able to figure out what it is. It's giant, but then it is going to be mind-numbing for you. So again, the same thing that we had in the appendix, I'm going to explain it here. First of all, for this, I did two things. First of all, I needed a code from Python, which is basically a programming language. For those of you who are familiar with it, good. If not, I'm going to explain it. It's a programming language that can be installed on your computers, and then you can do numerous things with it. Okay. Now, the other thing that I used was ChatGPT, the artificial intelligence with which I was able to extract the codes that I needed to pull off this calculation in order to just put it into the Python and get the final result. So I used two things, ChatGPT and Python, in order to be able to do this. Now the final result is going to be something like this, and I am going to show the whole process to you as well, God willing. Now the first thing that you need is to go to this website, online Python, but we're going to go later. Now here there is a code. It says that list of all, basically these are the things that I have typed so that I remember what they are. And the good thing about Python is that if you leave a hashtag in the beginning of the line that you are using, then that line is not going to be part of the code that you have done. Basically, it's not going to be part of the code that you are using. So basically the code starts from here. So those hashtag sections are going to be the information that I have left for myself and for you in order to be able to pull off this calculation. So it's very easy for you guys. You just copy and paste it in Python. You're going to be good. You're going to be good. But the point is that let's see how this is going to work. Now, 4 numbers that I told you. The first number is the number of the surah. So surah number 1, right? The second number is going to be the number of the verses. How many verses does surah number 1 have? 7. So we're going to write it there. Then we're going to have 7 numbers for each and every verse in the surah, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I have highlighted these so that the individual numbers of the verses are, discernible from the rest of the digits that we have. And then finally, we're going to have a 4th number, and the 4th number is going to be 28 here for this one, and that is the sum of these numbers, meaning 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 adds up to become 28. So we have 4 numbers, remember that, right? Now do this for every single surah in the Quran. Chapter 2, 286, all the 286 basically verses one by one, and then the sum of the verse numbers, 41,041. Chapter 3, 200 verse numbers, all the 200 verse numbers individually, and then the basically sum of the verses, 20,100. Chapter 4, number of the verses, all of them individually, and the sum, and so on and so forth. You go till the end of the Quran, and you're going to be able to basically have all of them. And I have prepared it for you here. You can take a look at it. It's going to be magnificent for you. Now, the rest of these are codes. And remember, the comma that is left here is part of the code that we are going to use for the programming language Python, so that it just adds each and every one of these numbers together. Remember, we're not going to put a giant number together. We're going to treat each and every line, right? For example, this one line, this is considered one line. All of it in programming language is considered one line because it's going to go just a very basically long line in the Python. This is another line, right? It just looks like this way in Google Docs, but in Python it's going to be just one straight line. This is one number. Now we're going to add up each and every line together. So this line is going to be added with this line, right? Suppose that you're adding these two numbers together, right, with a calculator. But since no calculator can do this, I had to use a programming language to be able to pull this off. So we're going to have, by the end, we're going to have 114 numbers that we're going to add up, right? Some of them are long, some of them are short. Either way, we're going to have 114 numbers because we have 114 chapters. This is the last chapter, right? 114, chapter 114, 6 verses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the sum of those six numbers. And then we're going to close the code. So we're going to have the addition. And these are the rest of the part of the code, which I got from ChatGPT, and it's going to give us the result. I've already put the result for you here. So that's going to be, this is going to be that 759 digit number that we talked about. Now let's see how this is going to work. So let's put all this in basically Python, then you would be able to understand how this is working. Now let's open online Python. So this is like a website that you could have an online Python for free. You don't need to install it on your computer. If you would like to, you're more than welcome to do the same thing. I mean, this is the same thing. You're going to copy and paste it. It's going to look like the same in your computer. Now, you delete all this because this is just some pre-designed commands which are there. And we're going to delete that. And if you look, it's going to give you lines. Now, we're going to copy and paste the whole thing that we have here. You can, if you are on Mac, you could use Command A. If you're on Windows, you could go Control A, and then you could go Command C, or simply just click right and copy it, right? The choice is yours. So I go Command C or Control C, and then you go into the online Python, you copy it here, Command V or Control V. And then you're going to have the whole thing. See, each and every one of the numbers is treated as one line, right? So we're going to have 114 lines which are going to be added together. And obviously there's a space between each and every one of them for ease of understanding, you know, that these are separate numbers. And then we're going to add them up all together. And we're going to go on this part, click run, and then it's going to give you the final result down below. Okay? Now, this is just half the story. Now you have to see how this number is whether this number is a multiple of 19 or not. Now, when you're done with this, there is a part here on online Python that says copy to clipboard. All right? Click on this. When you click on this, it's going to copy all this number that we have here. Then you should go into a giant number 19 calculator, because not every calculator is able to treat a 759 digit number as one number to be able to calculate it, whether it is a multiple of 19 or not. So you need a giant number calculator for that purpose. You can go to masjidtucson.org, you know, number 19 calculator. This giant calculator can go over you know, 100,000 digits, and then you can check it for yourself. For example, type 113. If you say divide, it says no, it's not divisible. But if you type 114, it says yes, it's divisible. Look at the yellow line. It says 19 times 6. Obviously, the second line and third line also exist, but they are for, you know, other calculations as well, because it's going to give you the number of the digits in that number. For example, 114 has 3 digits. So it wants to see whether the number of digits is also a multiple of 19 or not, or sum of the digits. And then 1 plus 1 plus 4, it says 6, sum of the digits, wants to see whether it is divisible or not. These are two other lines of calculation. We're not worried about them. We just want to see whether this number is a multiple of 19 or not. So we know that 114 is a multiple of 19. Now, back to what we were doing. So here, I said that copy to clipboard, come here, paste it here, basically. So remember, you can make this window bigger to see the whole number. And then remember to delete this part which was remaining from the command. At the end of the clipboard here, you know, at the end of this section, you have to delete this last part from your result. And this is the final result that we have, okay? Now, be ready for the miracle, subhanallah. It's a multiple of 19. Subhanallah. This number, it is 759 digit long, as it was mentioned here, 759 digit long, and it is a multiple of 19. And this is absolutely fantastic. This is absolutely fantastic. These are all the chapters in the Quran. All the chapters in the Quran. The number of the verses of that chapter, the number of individual verses of each chapter, and the sum of the verses of each chapter, and they, when you add them up, they become a giant number which is 759 digits long, and it is a multiple of 19, subhanallah. And this is 19 times this number. This is just absolutely fantastic, absolutely fantastic, subhanallah. And this is just the beginning of our journey into giant numbers. God willing, in the next session, I'm going to present to you giant numbers that is going to make your head wobble, and you have to just say subhanallah, and you have to prostrate to God for giving us such a wonderful mathematical system that proves to us beyond the shroud of any doubt whatsoever that this is a book from God Almighty, and this proves to us beyond the shroud of a doubt that God exists, and the words that we are reading in the Quran are His words. No human being is able to create such a intricate and intertwined and interlocking mathematical system in the Quran, and it is only the work of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, Rabb al Alameen, Lord of the universe, that has created such a wonderfully mathematically structured book, which just make the heads of great mathematicians wobble. Now, up to this point is enough. We need time to digest all these things that have occurred in this chapter, and God willing, in the next session, I'm going to present to you the rest of the giant numbers. Until the next session and the next file, may God be with you. Peace be upon you. Salāmun Alaykum.